If you were a 90s kid, odds are your earliest understanding of teamwork, pizza obsession and time travel came not from school but from 4 mutant turtles in bandanas absolutely wrecking shop across the centuries. Turtles in Time wasn't just another licensed beat 'em up, it was the sleepover game. The one that made you hog the good controller, argue over who got to be Raph, and shout "Cowabunga" like it was a battle cry. Whether you played it in a sticky floored arcade with a crowd behind you, or at home on the Super Nintendo in your pyjamas, this game hit something different. And somehow, it still does. Turtles in Time isn't just a fan favourite, it's one of the most beloved, celebrated beat-em-ups of all time. Lauded for its vibrant art, iconic soundtrack and buttery smooth gameplay, it's a title that defined an era and continues to top best of lists decades later. So if you enjoyed it in the arcade, or on your Super Nintendo, it left an impression that never quite faded. But what is it that makes this game so enduringly special? Let's find out. Hello ladies and gentlemen, Big Daddy Top Hat here. This is the amazing Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Turtles in Time. Yeah! We've genuinely been spoiled lately with some of the best beat-em-ups in years, but here's the mad bit. You can now grab a bunch of them for pocket change. Use my links to snag Shredder's Revenge for under $15, Streets of Rage 4 for less than $10, and one of my all-time favourites, Double Dragon Gaiden, for under $5. I've got massive discounts on thousands of games via the pinned comment, including up to 40% off brand new games like Fatal Fury City of the Wolves and Expedition 33. Every purchase helps support the channel and bags you a bargain. Happy shopping and happy gaming. Yes, that's right, it's that time once again to talk about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Turtles in Time, the crown jewel of Konami's arcade empire, and a game that encapsulates everything brilliant about early 90s gaming culture. But before we get carried away with time-travelling pirate ships and sewer hoverboards, let's take a brief step back to see how we got here, because the road to Turtles in Time wasn't always paved with pepperoni. The first Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles game arrived in 1989, a strange NES hybrid of top-down exploration and side-scrolling action. Ambitious, yes, but also notoriously unforgiving. It sold well, but most kids remember it less for beating Shredder and more for drowning in that infamous dam level. Then came Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, the arcade game, and suddenly everything clicked. Gone were the awkward mechanics and tonal confusion, in their place was a slick, energetic brawler that captured the cartoon spirit perfectly. The NES port did its best, but it was always chasing the high of the iconic 4-player arcade cabinet that ate through pocket money alongside The Simpsons and X-Men. The franchise exploded from there, Game Boy spin-offs, PC ports, even pinball, but it was 1991's Turtles in Time that marked the true pinnacle. Built on the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2 arcade hardware, this wasn't just another tie-in, it was the definitive Ninja Turtles experience. A year later, the game hit the Super Nintendo with the slightly perplexing title of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 4, Turtles in Time, referencing the NES exclusive Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3, The Manhattan Project. The odd naming of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 4, Turtles in Time on the Super Nintendo has confused plenty of fans over the years, but the reasoning behind it is surprisingly straightforward once you understand the release timeline. Today we shall look at and explore the quirks of both versions, but before we dive into how the Super Nintendo port handled all the time-hopping chaos, we need to go back to where it all began, the arcade original. And what a beginning it has! The game opens with a cutscene straight out of a Saturday morning fever dream. April O'Neil is mid-broadcast when Krang, piloting his massive exosuit, swoops in and swipes the entire Statue of Liberty. Seconds later, Shredder appears on screen with the kind of smug, scenery-chewing energy that could only belong to a cartoon villain. It's a simple premise, but one that perfectly sets the tone, silly, high stakes and joyfully unhinged. The perfect start for what is now considered one of the most legendary and memorable arcade games of all time. One cool factoid regarding this game is that Konami released Turtles in Time in 2 distinct arcade cabinet formats, a standard 2-player setup and a deluxe 4-player version. The latter was the definitive experience, each turtle locked to a specific control station, encouraging players to claim their favourite before someone else grabbed Donatello and ruined your evening. All 4 turtles, Leonardo, Donatello, Michelangelo and Rembrandt, were of course playable. While they shared nearly identical sprites, a common cost-saving measure at the time, each one had slightly different handling thanks to their unique weapons and subtly tweaked stats. The combat system was gloriously simple but deceptively rich. You had just 2 buttons, attack and jump, plus a joystick, but that basic setup allowed for surprising depth. Players could dash, perform sliding tackles, chain jump kicks, and even unleash special attacks that, in later versions, would drain a bit of health to prevent abuse. But the move that really stuck in players' memories was hurling foot soldiers directly into the screen. It was a cheeky, fourth wall breaking flourish that felt like a precursor to Mode 7, even though this was an arcade game, not a Super Nintendo title. Not only did it look cool, but it turned an otherwise straightforward throw into one of the most iconic and innovative mechanics in beat-em-up history. Turtles in Time followed the now iconic Konami formula, honed through earlier 4-player brawlers like The Simpsons and X-Men. These weren't just spiritual siblings, they were mechanical cousins, built on the same original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles based arcade hardware. This shared foundation was engineered to handle large, vibrant sprites with smooth animations and minimal slowdown, even during chaotic on-screen battles. So if Turtles in Time ever felt like it played a lot like the Simpsons arcade game, that's no coincidence. Under the hood, they were practically twins. The soundtrack for Turtles in Time absolutely slaps, and it should, given the pedigree behind it. The arcade original was composed by Matsuhiko Izumi, a Konami legend also known for his work on Guitar Freaks and Dance Dance Revolution. The first level wastes no time dropping you into the action, kicking things off in the steam-filled, neon-soaked streets of New York City. It's the classic urban beat-em-up opener, alleyways, scaffolding, and foot soldiers pouring in from every direction. But Turtles in Time elevates the cliché by infusing it with personality, visual gags, expressive animations, and that unmistakable cartoon charm. Even in this opening stage, Konami starts layering in environmental hazards that add variety and challenge. Crashing wrecking balls, explosive barrels, and Krang swooping in to fire lasers across the screen. It's all delivered under the guise of fun chaos, but it's secretly a tutorial, teaching you to dodge, adapt, and stay mobile, or risk becoming Turtle Soup by stage 2. From the outset, Turtles in Time sets itself apart from the flood of button-mashing brawlers. It's not just polished, it's packed with style, humour, and smart pacing, proving that Konami knew how to take a genre template and crank it up to 11. No wonder this title is so beloved. Naturally, this stage culminates in a boss fight, and it's no throwaway. You're launched into a mid-air showdown with Baxter Stockman, now in full mutant fly mode. He zips across the screen in jittery patterns, spraying projectiles and refusing to sit still. It's a sharp contrast to the predictable grunt fights you've just been through, and an early sign that boss encounters in this game won't be mere palette swaps. But of course, this is only the beginning of this unforgettable journey. Next up on our sewer surfing tour, Alley Cat Blues, a grime-caked back alley that swaps Times Square's flashy neon for flickering street lamps and overflowing skips. This is where the level design starts to flex a little more creatively. Enemies pour out of stairwells, leap from rooftops, and generally skulk around like the kind of loiterers that would have Splinter filing a health and safety complaint. The stage captures peak 90s urban grit, busted hydrants, graffiti-covered walls, and enough scattered rubbish to qualify as a minor environmental disaster. It's scrappy, but all the more endearing for it. Enemy variety also gets a much-needed shake-up here. Alongside the usual palette-swapped foot soldiers are bizarre robotic foes wearing boxing gloves, a baffling but oddly fitting addition that feels like Mega Man wandered into a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles fever dream. It's ridiculous, it's brilliant, it's exactly the kind of nonsense the game thrives on. This one culminates in a battle against Metalhead, the Turtles' robotic doppelganger. Unlike the mindless goons you've smashed through up to this point, Metalhead actually fights back with intelligence. He zips around the screen, blends melee and ranged attacks, and forces players to ditch the mindless button mashing in favour of a more tactical approach. It's a noticeable difficulty spike, and a welcome one. Then of course it's time to head underground. The sewers are practically home turf for our green heroes, but Konami gives this familiar setting a futuristic twist. Rather than skateboards, the Turtles now cruise through the muck on glowing neon hoverboards, because this was 1991, and why not? This is the first auto-scrolling stage in the game, and with it comes a sudden tempo shift. Players now have to juggle dodging fast-moving hazards, blocking aerial attacks, and generally staying on their toes. It's chaotic, unrelenting, and a brilliant way to break up the rhythm of traditional beat-em-up levels. The stage ends with a relatively forgettable boss, more of a cooldown than a challenge, but it serves a purpose, because just as you're catching your breath, the plot swerves hard. Shredder shows up looking like he's just returned from a quantum leap binge, and with a maniacal grin hurls the Turtles 25 million years into the past. Because if Turtles in Time hadn't already made its central theme crystal clear, it's about to. With a dramatic cutscene, the game finally cashes in on its title. The skyscrapers and steam vents of New York City vanish in an instant as the turtles hurtle backwards through time, landing shell first into the primeval chaos of prehistoric Turtlesaurus. And yes, it's a jungle out there. Literally. The entire stage feels like it was plucked straight from Cadillacs and dinosaurs, with dense foliage, cloudy ash skies, and enemy foot soldiers now absurdly mounted on pterodactyls. Because of course they are! These airborne dinos aren't just for show either. They gleefully drop rocks on your head, triggering flashbacks to the worst kind of Mega Man aerial trollery. You know the type. As you brawl your way forward, the environment transitions from jungle to a molten lava-scorched battlefield. The stage culminates in a scrap against Cement Man, the hulking grey-skinned mutant with a body made of living concrete. This fight rewards patience and positioning more than brute force. Flanking is key. It's a shift from the usual beat-em-up boss logic of hit until it falls down. Once the prehistoric menace is defeated, it's straight into the next time vortex. This time to the high seas of 1530 AD for Skull and Crossbones. Set aboard a creaky pirate ship, this stage is full of booming cannons, rotting timber, and foot soldiers now decked out in their finest Poundland pirate cosplay. The real highlight here, a tag team boss fight against Toka and Razor. It's the first proper 2-on-1 encounter in the game. Well, unless you're playing 2 or 4 player mode, that is. And it ramps up both the challenge and spectacle. The kiddie gloves are off, you're in the deep end now. But the adventure is far from over yet. Next up, a ride into the Wild West. Stage 6 whisks the turtles to 1885 in a sepia-toned, side-scrolling showdown atop a hurtling freight train. The background whips by at speed, while the subtly bobbing floor gives the illusion of motion, an impressive touch for 1991. Foot soldiers dressed as bandits leap aboard from horseback like it's a Sunset Riders crossover episode, which amusingly also released that same year. Konami's synergy at its finest. And once you've kicked enough bandits' butt and dealt with the train top boss, it's time to leap forward again into the far future of, checks notes, 2020. Now 2020 might not feel particularly futuristic anymore, especially considering a lot of us spent most of the year indoors having a pint and waiting for it all to blow over. But back in 1991, it sounded like we'd all be zipping around on hoverboards and living on the moon. To Konami's credit, they leaned into that sci-fi optimism with both feet. This stage serves as a high-tech echo of the earlier sewer surfing level, only now the hoverboards actually hover. Enemies are armed with laser blasters, and the speed is relentless. It plays like a turbocharged homage to Back to the Future Part 2, a loving tribute to an era when the future still felt wide open, and a gentle reminder that science still owes us all a hoverboard. The stage ends with a high-stake rematch with Krang in his towering exosuit. Defeat him and the turtles are flung even further through the time stream, this time to the ludicrously advanced year of 2100. Realistically, we'll be lucky if we still have electricity, drinkable water, and a functioning internet that isn't 90% AI-generated content created in Pakistan by that point. And the closest we'll get to cyborg ninjas, an Amazon delivery drone that mistakes your nan for a thief. But in the case of this game, Konami's imagination doesn't hold back. Their vision of 2100 is a chrome-coated fever dream, gleaming corridors, blinking control panels, Death Star vistas, and every sci-fi trope crammed onto a PCB like it was a final year film student's homage to Star Wars. It's wonderfully absurd, but it works. As the last leg of the Turtles' time-hopping quest, it ramps the chaos to its peak. The climax, one last brawl with Krang, this time stripped of his mech and fighting on foot, before the Turtles are finally hurled back to their own time. And that leads us to the grand finale, a showdown with Shredder himself. No hoverboards, no laser beams, no prehistoric reptiles or pirate ships. Just 4 turtles, 1 iconic villain, and the Statue of Liberty standing tall in the background, bringing the entire time warp journey full circle. What started with Krang nicking America's most recognisable landmark ends with her standing proudly once again, as if to say, cheers lads, you've done your civic duty. The closing cutscene delivers a suitably patriotic bow, complete with a news report celebrating the Turtles' heroic efforts to save the city. But political side-eyes aside, let's talk about what else made this arcade version so memorable. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles in Time wasn't just a decent licensed game. It was a legitimately brilliant arcade experience by any standard. With punchy, cartoon-faithful visuals, a control scheme tighter than Rembrandt's headband, and a soundtrack bursting with Saturday morning chaos, it was effortlessly accessible and instantly addictive. You didn't need a manual, you just walked up, slapped a coin in, and started drop-kicking foot soldiers like it was your civic duty. More importantly, this wasn't just a reskin version of Konami's earlier Turtles game. Everything was sharper, the combat, the stage design, the music, and the gimmicks inspired. Tossing enemies at a screen wasn't just funny, it was iconic. It felt innovative, fresh, and more than a little cheeky. Critics noticed, fans noticed, and the result, Konami's best-selling arcade game of its time. Not bad for a title starring sewer-dwelling reptiles with a pizza addiction and a vocabulary ripped straight from Bill and Ted. But here's the twist. Despite being built to guzzle coins on the sticky floors of Funland and every seaside pier in the UK, Turtles in Time was destined for something more. In 1992, it made the leap to the Super Nintendo, and that, dear viewers, is where things get interesting. Because while the Super Nintendo version looks like Turtles in Time, and sounds like Turtles in Time, and yes, even feels like Turtles in Time, it's also very much its own beast. Right out of the gate, the limitations of the hardware are apparent. Sprites are a little smaller, animation frames are a little choppier, and the once bustling enemy waves are cut down to a more modest 4 or 5 on screen. The rich layered backgrounds of the arcade cabinet now flatter, more restrained, like someone gave your imagination a budget and a bedtime. It's the kind of visual compromise you'd expect from any early 90s arcade to console port. Like Street Fighter 2 on the Super Nintendo, it's absolutely still worth playing. It just doesn't punch you in the face with a spectacle quite the same way. And let's be real, if you wanted arcade perfection at home in 1992, you needed rich parents and a Neo Geo. The rest of us made do with a slightly squashed Turtles and called it a win. Of course, the multiplayer also took a bit of a knock. While the arcade let 4 players bash foot soldiers shoulder to shoulder in pure pizza fuel chaos, the Super Nintendo trims that back to just 2. It's not a deal breaker, but it definitely changes the vibe from a noisy full-blown party brawler to more of a me and my mate against the world affair. And yet, despite the hardware limitations, this isn't just a watered-down version of the arcade original, because Konami didn't simply shrink the game to fit in a cartridge. They reworked it, reimagined it, and in some places, they absolutely nailed it. When the game made its leap to the SNES, the music was rearranged by Kazuhiko Uehara and Harumi Iko, both veterans of Konami's golden era and familiar names for Tournament Fighters fans. Each stage track brings its own flavour, energetic, catchy, and steeped in that Saturday morning cartoon chaos. It's not quite Chrono Trigger or Sonic 2 levels of iconic, but for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, it hits the mark. Changes can be found across the board. Take stage 3. On the surface, it looks like a straight adaptation of the arcade sewer surfing gauntlet. Same hoverboards, same high-speed dodging. But get to the end and surprise! The boss fight's completely different. It's a small but telling change, an early sign that this port isn't just copying the arcade beat for beat, but remixing it with intention. Then there's the Technodrome, a full-blown exclusive stage for the Super Nintendo version and a proper showstopper. This sprawling mechanical hellscape is packed with robotic enemies, conveyor belts, and a mid-stage ambush by Toka and Razor, bosses who didn't show up until much later in the arcade version. Their earlier arrival here makes for a brutal wake-up call. But the level doesn't stop flexing there. It also features a classic beat-em-up elevator sequence, one of those rising platforms where enemies rain down from all directions. Weirdly, the arcade version skipped this trope entirely, making its appearance here feel like a smart, almost overdue inclusion. And when you reach the top, you're met with one of the Super Nintendo port's boldest changes, a first-person style boss fight against Shredder, who lobs projectiles at you from a vantage point as you chuck foot soldiers directly at the screen to fight back. It's weird, it's clunky, it's inspired. A strange little experiment that somehow works and frustrates in equal measures. These creative flourishes pop up again and again through the Super Nintendo version. It's less a direct port and more of a director's cut, pared back in places, sure, but often bolder, weirder, and occasionally better. Because when arcade developers were usually just trimming games down for home use, Konami looked at the Super Nintendo and went, right lads, let's remix things, and thank God they did. This kind of creative tinkering pops up throughout the SNES version. Take the prehistoric stage, once again the boss fight gets swapped out. Some players might favour the arcade's tougher, more strategic Cement Man, but that's beside the point. What matters is that Konami didn't just slap the original content onto a cartridge and call it a day. They shuffled the deck, took some risks and tested new ideas. Even Skull and Crossbones gets a notable remix, with Toka and Razor already dealt with in the Technodrome. Who steps in to swab the decks? None other than Rocksteady and Bebop, cosplaying as pirates complete with swords, hats, and the kind of confused menace that can only come from two henchmen wondering how they got here. It's ridiculous, it's glorious, it's exactly what you want from a 90s Ninja Turtles game. A surprise to be sure, but well, you know the rest. The Western train stage is mostly faithful to its arcade roots, but after that, the SNES version throws in a brand new surprise, a futuristic stage built specifically to show off the console's Mode 7 capabilities. The whole level plays out like a zero-gravity brawl across a distorted, shifting landscape. Backgrounds twist and scour beneath your feet in ways that would have melted minds back in '92. It's flashy, it's slightly gimmicky, and it's completely exclusive to the home release. From there, it's onto the penultimate showdown with Krang, an encounter similar to his arcade Stage 5 appearance, but now set within the newly minted Futurescape. Then finally, we arrive at the last stop of this time-travelling tour, the Starbase. Or as I like to call it, Starkiller Base before J.J. Abrams could ruin it. This metallic nightmare is your final gauntlet, and Konami makes it count. First, another fight with Krang, just to be sure he's thoroughly flattened, and then the big one, Shredder. But not the standard issue version, no, this Shredder has hit the gym. Added some steel-plated flair, and shows up looking like a mutant mashup of Kevin Nash and Lord Zed. The infamous Super Shredder. He's massive, he's angry, and he's clearly not here for polite conversations. But once you manage to blow out his quads, the game is over. And that, dear viewers, is the Super Nintendo version of Turtles in Time. Does it match the arcade original blow for blow? Not quite. The graphics are scaled down. The 4-player chaos is trimmed to 2. The sheer bombast is dialed back just a notch. But this isn't a straight downgrade. It's a thoughtful, confident reimagining. New stages, boss swaps, inventive use of hardware tricks. It's clear that Konami didn't just port Turtles in Time to the Super Nintendo, they recrafted it, and in doing so they delivered one of the most impressive arcade to home conversions of the 16-bit era. A game that, even in a crowded genre, still manages to stand tall, shells, swords, surface slang and all. Cowabunga indeed. Critics at the time loved it. Electronic Gaming Monthly handed the SNES version a glowing 9 out of 10, applauding its faithful gameplay, inventive additions, and the way it captured the heart and humour of the arcade original. The only real ding, it was maybe a little too easy, which for a game about mutant reptiles fighting robots hardly seemed like a deal breaker. All game praised the visuals, highlighting just how closely they mimicked the animated series look and feel, while the soundtrack and sound effects received similarly enthusiastic nods. Nintendojo went all in, boldly declaring it the greatest Ninja Turtles game ever made, but perhaps Entertainment Weekly summed it up best. The Turtles may have peaked on the big screen, but in video game land they're just reaching their potential. And honestly, they weren't wrong. So now that we've rummaged through both incarnations of this classic, the arcade's explosive coin-gobbling chaos, and the Super Nintendo's lovingly remixed home edition, it's time to answer the big question. Which version of Turtles in Time actually hits harder? Or maybe the real question is, does it even matter when both still hit different? Because at the end of the day, this isn't just a game, it's a memory. A pizza-scented portal back to CRT screens, sticky arcade carpets, and pure unfiltered joy of drop-kicking foot soldiers with your best mate. Whether you've played it with 4 players crammed around an arcade cab, or 2 kids huddled in front of a telly on a Saturday morning, Turtles in Time wasn't just another brawler. It's one of the greatest of all time, and for that reason, we will always celebrate it. If you haven't already got round to it, I implore you to play Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge. It's the best Turtles beat-em-up we have received since, and some people think it's even better. Don't forget you can use my links to snag it for under $15, Streets of Rage 4 for less than $10, and one of my all-time favourites, Double Dragon Gaiden, for under $5. I've got massive discounts for you on thousands of games via the pinned comment, including up to 40% off of brand new games like Fatal Fury City of the Wolves and Expedition 33. Every purchase helps support the channel and bags you a bargain. Happy shopping and cheerio.